We're still part of the system. The system is you have a disability. There's no way that you're going to be matched up with someone who doesn't have an official outside obvious disability. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it doesn't have to be an obvious. It could be an inner disability, but an existing discussed, openly discussed disability. It's generally going to be a disability with a disability. This is our community.
Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Frida Weisel, and here I explore topics related to Judaism, Yiddish, insular societies, and very often Orthodox Judaism. Today, for my long-form interview series, I'm delighted to speak with Rachel Yenti Boydig, who is an advocate for the visually impaired in the Orthodox community and beyond. Rachel Yenti lost her vision at age 12 due to a genetic condition and has built an amazing family and career while also paving a path for accessibility improvement in her community and in the Yiddish-speaking world. Welcome, Rachel Yenti, and thanks so much for doing this.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
How are you doing?
Good.
So I want to start the interview if I can ask you to share about your experience losing your vision at age 12.
Okay. So it didn't happen from 1 minute to the next. I started losing my vision as a very young child, very gradually. So I got glasses when I was about 6 years old, and my vision kept deteriorating as I was getting older. And by the time I was about 13 years old, I became what they call legally blind. So someone who's legally blind doesn't mean they're totally blind. It just means that their vision is limited enough that they can qualify for specific services and resources and assistance from the government. So that's what happened when I was about 13 years old. Basically, your vision is limited enough that you can't function in daily living without additional supports. So I got this teacher of the visually impaired for assistance in school to help me keep up with my work, to modify my materials and all that. So my vision continued deteriorating as I was getting older. I'm almost 40 years old now, and I definitely have quite limited vision in some ways. I see very blurry, but I still have fairly good usable vision. So it's a little confusing because I sometimes I say I'm sighted to the blind and I'm blind to the sighted. I'm somewhere in between. I can't see obviously small print. I can only see large print. It's training my eyes. I can't see color very well. I can't see any detail at all. I don't see things from far away. As they come closer, I see them a bit better as they come very close, like within a few feet.
How much do you see of me?
Nothing. I see a little bit light on the computer. Nothing. Not much. I go very close to the screen. I could sort of see maybe a face of a person. I can't see any detail though.
Got it.
And also, especially when I'm looking centrally, my central vision is my worst vision. So when I'm looking straight ahead, I can almost say I'm almost basically blind. When I start looking sideways and turning my eyes, that's when I can see better. My peripheral vision is my better vision. So I can't see straight ahead almost at all, but I can sort of see the furniture and the things on the side.
So you're in the Orthodox community, right? You're in Monsey, right?
Yeah.
Can you speak to what it means to be visually impaired in the context of the Orthodox community? Like, what does it mean to study the Talmud for a visually impaired person, or to have a siddur, a prayer book?
Okay, so I guess I'll talk first from my perspective, and then I'll talk about the overall communal perspective. So personally, when I started losing my vision, I was able to read large print, but I didn't get so much material when I was younger. Like somehow nobody got me a large print, a siddur or anything, almost at all. The one thing I remember my father had in his house was this huge case of a lot of Hagudis of large print. He got it. He somehow got it to print it. That's one thing. My brother somehow was more, catered to, one of them at least, and got like a computer. It was in the 1990s, and my father obtained somehow a computer for him to be able to enlarge his stuff. At some point he got in large print, and sometimes at some point he got in the computer to do his own materials in large print. So he somehow was more equipped with the whole large print situation. I didn't get so much large print. I did use a screen, which is called the CCTV, like a magnifying screen. In the beginning, I was very resistant to using it, but eventually I did start using it, and so did some of my siblings. And that basically is a screen, and whatever you put underneath comes up enlarged on the screen. So you don't necessarily need adaptive material to use that. But of course, Shabbos and Yontiv, the holidays, is a problem. You can't really use it. Some people hold that if you keep it on and you don't, and just keep it on over Shabbos, then you use it. We never used it. So during the week, I used that a lot. I did get some of my, actually not my Jewish books, some of my secular, some of my general studies books, I got in audio format. So and then of course I was introduced to Braille, and I was very resistant to it, and eventually I did learn Braille, but really more for English reading than for prayers or anything. I know Hebrew Braille, and it's just tedious. English Braille has shortcuts, and it's easy to read. Yiddish and Hebrew, there is Braille for it, but it's kind of tedious. So if you can rely on large print, or you don't want to read at all, sometimes people prefer that. I'll talk later about my career, but my students, I have some students who are totally blind, and they are blind from birth, so their only way of reading is Braille, and they're pretty fluent with Hebrew and Yiddish Braille, but English Braille is always more efficient because it has all these contractions and shortcuts that make it much quicker and easier to read. So that was sort of my experience with large print and Braille and all that. And then technology, when I was younger, there wasn't much. There's much more now. There's the computer. There's what they call refreshable Braille displays.
Wow.
Basically, it's like electronic Braille. So you can have files on it of whatever you want, and then it comes up like as you go one line at a time. Actually, they just came up with a new one that you could do a few lines, but I haven't used it.
It pops out on a screen?
It pops up and down. Like as you go, you have to press a button, and as you go down the lines, it pops up on it's not really a screen, it's just a display. And you can type and read what you typed, and then you can put files if it's ready, good, BRF, they call it Braille files. You can read it. So now I guess this will sort of transition to the communal availability. So there is there's a generic Jewish organization called Jewish Braille Institute, JBI International, but they're not necessarily only for Orthodox people. They definitely also serve the Orthodox community, but they serve everyone. So they've been there for many, many, many years. I think like 70 years, and they've made stuff not as much in large print, more in Braille, and even large print. They do one generic thing. Like they don't give you specific sizes. Some people need smaller, some people need larger, and they'll do one. I think there's only like their Haggadah or the Machzor or whatever it is has English on one side and Hebrew on the other side, so it makes it even more bulky. But they've definitely been around for many years and done quite a bit for the community. There's also an organization called Jewish Heritage for the Blind. They also make some, generic sized or Braille. I haven't heard about, from them much recently. I don't even know if they still exist. But specifically in the Orthodox community, there's an organization called Computer Services for the Blind. They started about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. Basically, it started because a computer programmer was learning half of the day with someone who went blind literally from 1 minute to the next. And he tried doing research of what's out there, and he saw that it wasn't enough. If somebody really wants to intensively learn and needs custom stuff, it's not enough, and he feels like there could be more. So he started this organization and started developing, simple, technology, like, just getting the files on the computer and making it a large print or Braille. But then he got involved in even more than that, and he started doing more very customized technology. So I was talking about the refreshable Braille displays. So he has a whole program where he'll put a whole bunch of files on a tablet, and it's connected to this refreshable Braille display, and you can literally switch from one cipher to another by a press of a button. So you can, like, you learn Chumash and then Rashi and whatever you need to do, like, pretty efficiently. So that's like an amazing program that he developed, and some people use it. The problem is, the good thing is that we have it, and we're very grateful. The problem is that a lot of people, especially those who lose vision later on in life, have a very hard time learning Braille. Braille is not easy to learn for anyone, and for sure not for someone who used to be a print reader or has some ability still to read print. It's a real learning curve. It takes tons of patience and a lot of practice, and there are many people who are visually impaired who have lost their vision over, I would say when they were 20 plus, and they just never learned Braille. So some use large print and some do it orally. It's sad. It's one of my big, speaking about accessibilities and my mission. We're trying so hard to push people to just do it. I said, you're anyway bored on Shabbos and Yontiv. You may as well practice your Braille. That's like the main time. During the week, you have so much technology, all this audio stuff that you could listen to, and it's great. But Shabbos and Yontiv, you can't. And the truth is that even in the non-Jewish world, some people say, oh, Braille is extinct. You have all this audio stuff. But you know what? You still need to have a connection with a print. When you read large print, you read the actual print. When you're listening, you're not reading the print. And you can miss certain, syllables, certain sounds. And especially for people, younger kids who need to learn, spelling or whatever, it's always good. Braille is not extinct. And you know what? I even use Braille virtually I know this is totally not related necessarily to Judaism or my community, but when I do my typing on my iPhone on, to type messages, my first choice is always dictation. But with dictation, it can really mess it up, especially when you say Yiddish or Jewish terms. But even if you say other things, and when I want it to be more perfect, my second option is to do what they call Braille screen input. I don't know if you want me to show it to you. I could bring my phone.
Yeah, I want to see it.
So I'm still relying on audio for the feedback, but for the input, I use what they call Braille screen input. So I will open a message, and I'll actually go to the message where
You're seeing what you're swiping now?
No, I'm listening. It looks like I'm looking, but I'm paying attention. I have a blind friend who says, when we're listening to a speech, we're not looking at you. It usually looks like we're looking at, down at the table, but that means we're paying attention.
I see.
Anyway,
I'm not hearing anything.
So usually I keep my screen off completely, and I just do it auditorily. I'm turning the screen on so that you can see it.
Got it.
Like if I can't see the screen, why should anybody else see the screen? But I'm turning it on so that you can see what's going on.
Right.
So I turn what they call the rotor. It's part of like the accessibility of the iPhone. It's called VoiceOver. One thing has a rotor.
Okay.
And I turn and I get the Braille screen input, and I'm holding 3 fingers on one side and 3 fingers on the other side, and I'm going to be typing Braille, because Braille is made up of 6 dots. So the 3 and the 3 correspond to the 6 dots of Braille. So I'm going to now type. It's actually to you. I'm sending you a message.
Okay.
Hi. You see? Hi.
Yeah.
How are you? My husband thinks that I type faster with this than he types, with his fingers.
With his fingers?
Just pressing one letter at a time. But that's basically how it works. And then I just turn it, and then I just swipe to send. I just swiped, and you just got your message.
I got it.
Okay.
I just got it.
So that's basically how I use my virtual Braille. So even for that, Braille is still helpful. I'm a very big fan of Braille, and I'm there's an organization called the National Federation of the Blind, NFB, and there's the ACB. Most of these organizations are still mostly fans of Braille, and they think it's still very important. There's so much that you can still do with Braille. Someone who has to read, a speech or something. You can't do it with audio. You have to. There are some people that could do it, but it's not so simple. You have to listen and then repeat what you're listening. If you're feeling it with your fingers, it's just simpler. Even if you're a bit slow, but it's still something that exists and very alive and well. Anyway,
are there programs to teach Braille, let's say in yeshivas, for your son?
So there aren't official programs. So as I said before, I had a teacher of the visually impaired myself. So I am also a teacher of the visually impaired by trade. I got my degree almost 4 years ago. It was a very, very long trek till I got to this, to finally graduate. And sometimes I sort of feel like I regret it. I should have gone on a different career path just for myself, because there's a lot of frustration involved, and I couldn't get a proper job and all that stuff. And with a proper, career, I could have probably done so much better. But on the other hand, I am helping a lot of people, and I am making a difference, I hope. So for that part, it's worth it. As a teacher of visually impaired, there isn't a specific method on how to teach Braille. Everyone has to figure out their own, and different people are different. And, so we weren't really taught a real proper methodology. But I give some credit to my son's TVI, who helped teach the Braille, but I definitely was very involved in the process. If not for me, I think they would have just kept him at large print, because he could see large print, and his primary means of reading is still large print. He mostly uses, technology, uses an iPad, a laptop, and all that stuff. He's very techy and it's very helpful. And that's how he manages mostly in yeshiva. But he still has the Braille as a backup. And recently he actually initiated that he wants to try to read more Hebrew Braille, because sometimes the lighting is very strong, and especially on Shabbos and Yontiv, when he has to read large print and he can't use his technology, the lighting bothers him more. And he said, he wants to try to do Braille more. So that's very good. And I'm so glad I taught him the English Braille when he was younger, because like that's once you have to transfer just from English to Hebrew Braille, it's not such a big transition. It's like you know how to feel. The biggest part of Braille is not as much memorizing the dots and actually learning to feel them, to get your fingers sensitive enough. That's the hard part. Teachers who become TVIs, they go to school, they memorize it, they don't learn how to feel it. They look at it. It's much, much easier. It's still hard for them. It's a learning curve, but it's not as hard as learning to feel it tactily. That's where the real challenge comes in. So my son is definitely pretty good, with feeling the Braille. He's not very quick. He's, it takes some time to read. But he, if and when he's really, really ready, he started a little bit recently, then he'll be able to transition more easily.
He reads Yiddish, English, and Hebrew?
Yeah, Yiddish and Hebrew is the same thing.
Got it. It's the same alphabet.
Letters,
okay.
The same alphabet. So English he knows. English he does really more fluently, as I told you before, because there's all these shortcuts that are called contractions. And Hebrew, he did a little bit. I'm telling you, he asked me for a Tehillim now. We started yeshiva now this year, just a month ago, and I brought him a Tehillim. I asked him, did you end up using it? He said, I used it a few times, and he wants to try to do Chumash with it, but he wants it without the Nekidus, so he has less to read, so we have to still get it for him. But, everything, it's a pain, because when you read Hebrew Braille, you have to read a letter and then an akida, a letter and then an akida. It's a pain, a real pain. But, for those who have no other choice, it's great, And Yiddish, the same thing, you have to read a letter and a vowel and a letter and a, whatever. There's no shortcuts. So that makes it. I know there was recently a whole write-up about Yiddish Braille, and somebody went to the university and they wanted to learn Yiddish Braille. But I think their Yiddish, the Yiddish that the non-Hasidic people use, is a little bit different. And I don't know what they use, but they must be using some symbols that makes it not so easy to translate, with special Braille translation software. But for us, it's not so hard. As long as we have files available in Word or readable PDFs so that we can copy and paste, then we can print any Yiddish or Hebrew document. And we always wish for more, because there's not much that's available that way. And we have to sometimes manually type it. And that's why, even my students don't read much of Yiddish other than what they really need for school. We just do English Braille much more, because it's just much more readily available. Even if it's Jewish material, but it's English and it's just easier.
I'm just gonna explain that Nekidus are the accents in Hebrew that are like serve as the vowels, and also Yiddish, standard Yiddish, not Hasidic Yiddish, has a lot of accents. What I call pintelich and strechelich. Maybe that's the issue, that they tried to translate it into Braille.
Right.
Yeah. So what you're, for instance, when you were a young student, you would sit in class with a screen. Is that how it worked?
I mean, I wasn't a young student. I was kind of young, not that young. I got my CCTV. The first one in school I got when I was in 10th grade. Before that, I would record my teachers. I had one at home, and I would rewrite my notes, either record my teacher or borrow classmates' notes, and that's how I rewrote it. I started using the CCTV when I was like in 8th grade, somewhere in the middle of 8th grade. And then when I was in 10th grade, that's when I started, we got a spare CCTV that I was able to bring to school. And I would, mostly do most of my work with that CCTV, with that screen. And now my son has a different kind of screen, much more sophisticated screens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask you about the emotional experience of being a teenager and losing your vision?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very open about it, so it's fine. So I had a very difficult time with it. I know I have my father and my siblings, but somehow I felt like I was different, and it was just very, very, very difficult. I was completely in denial, and then when I got the official diagnosis that I was legally blind and this was happening, I couldn't accept it. It was very, very hard. I actually went to a therapist. She helped me as much as she was able to help me. What could she do? She couldn't bring my vision back, but she tried her best, and she did a good job, as much as she was able to do. And that actually put me on the path of going to college. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college, not even to seminary, to like a Hebrew seminary. And I was the first one in my entire extended family to initiate the idea of going to seminary after 12th grade. It was just a small half-day Muncie seminary, and I actually thought I would get college credit for it, but I didn't.
Oh no.
I already was on the path. Let me take one more step back. The idea of college came because I think I was in 10th or 11th, 10th or 11th grade, and we got services from the local, what they call New York Commission for the Blind, and they help with services at home, something called rehab services. They help you like more in the house to learn how to cook or clean or organize within the house. And then there's something called orientation and mobility training, O&M, more like training to get around the community, use a cane, which I now use much more than I used to, basically to become an independent traveler. That's the ultimate goal. And the counselor was at our house, and she asked me, so what do you think you want to do after high school? And I said, I have no idea. And then my father was there, and my father is very open-minded in many ways, I'm sure you know. And he said, I think she wants to go to college. I think maybe she can go to Torah college. There's a college. And I was like, oh, I'm like, oh, that's not a bad idea. She said, well, she's not in an accredited high school and she wants to go to college. She has to work on her GEDs. So, I found out more about it. I went to my TVI in school and I said, I don't need your help so much with my, schoolwork. So can we work on the GED? So she was really nice, and she did. She got me all the prep materials, and we prepared till the end of 12th grade. And then we took the exams right at the end when I graduated high school. And that started me on my path to college. So I wanted to become, initially my idea was, I went, I saw my own therapist, and I felt like it was such a nice thing and it could be so helpful to people. And that was my initial dream of becoming a social worker, to help people to do therapy, clinical therapy. And then after a while, a long story, I finally changed my major. By the time I did my master's, my undergrad is in community and human services, because I was going to go towards the social work. And for many reasons, one of them being that like I'm not the type that could just sit and listen to people. I need to solve problems. I can't just sit and listen to problems that can't be solved most of the time. I'm so practical, and I'm so black and white. I was like, this is not for me. So I ended up going into this, changing my field and going into the teacher of the visually impaired field. For many years, I actually was a caseworker. I was like a what they used to call a service coordinator. I love that too, because I was able to help people, and like very practical and very like hands-on, and I loved doing that, and I still feel like I'm a caseworker at heart. So many times, even as a TVI, I am sort of a caseworker. I get very involved with my students, probably much more than any other TVI. I want them to get services at home, and I want them to do this, and I want them to. And sometimes I wonder why these mothers still want me to be their kids' TVI, because I make them so crazy. But I really mean well, and I sometimes, get very passionate and whatever. But my goal is to really make people independent, and especially the totally blind kids. That's like a whole new learning curve for me. I always thought I knew so much about the visually impaired. I'm visually impaired, and I have family members, and I have a support group that I didn't even talk about yet inside Beyond Eyesight for Jewish families who have visually impaired members. And then, when I graduated about 3.5 years ago, and I started working with my totally blind students who are blind from birth or from a very young age, I was in for a surprise, quite a shock. Yeah. And I still am. I'm like, wow, she doesn't know. Like, I'll give you like the simplest thing that I just figured out. Like when you walk through a door that closes by itself, people see it and they catch it, they grab it, and they take over. And I'm like, my students don't know how to do this. Everyone's always holding the door open for them. And they don't even know that there's such a concept of holding a door open for people, or holding it open for yourself while someone takes over. I'm in the middle of teaching this to my students. I can't tell you, like every little thing, it's like I'm learning, and I'm figuring it out, and I'm really hoping that one day I can help them, become as independent as they can be. I'm also busy with this. I'm not even letting you talk about this blind doctor book, and that's why one of the reasons probably why I'm so obsessed about him is like I want my students to. I don't know if they want them to be like him, but at least get some of these skills somehow. I've had many ups and downs throughout the years. I can't say I've ever accepted my disability. I hate being visually impaired. If there was a cure, I'd go for it. But my coping mechanism is basically to help myself and to help others, even sometimes even more so to help others than to help myself. And that's what really keeps me going when I accomplish and I can help others and I can make a difference in other people's lives. That's what really keeps me going and, emotionally and practically. So, yeah.
Do you tell yourself, I have such a wonderful life? Like, do you sometimes uh, look back and to teenage you and say, look at how, wonderfully it turned out?
Sometimes, I should say it more. Sometimes I feel like,
Yeah.
oh, nothing ever works out for me, and negativity is always easier than positive. My husband's much more positive than I am, but I'm always like somehow automatically focusing on the negative. But I try so hard to not do that and focus on the positive. And sometimes people will tell me, "You don't even know. You know what a difference you made in my life or in someone's life." I'm like, wow, that's good. I have to remind myself about that. I forget. I always feel like
Yeah.
I'm not doing enough and I need to do more. I guess in a way it's a good attitude, because if you feel like you're doing enough, then you're not going to want to do more. So, yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes you can take a break. But part of the lesson of this, the Blind Doctor book, which I'm in the middle of reading, who's an amazing young Jewish man in like the 1920s, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, he died 2024.
Oh,
Yeah.
who was born blind and became a doctor. He worked himself to to death.
Right, right. So I remind myself that sometimes also. Sometimes I have to take a step back and, take care of myself or prioritize,
Yeah,
realize that there's nothing I can do about certain situations, or, I did my share. So I
yeah.
try. I don't work as hard as he did. I mean, he literally didn't sleep and he didn't eat and he didn't do anything because he thought he had to work in every university and every hospital and help every person that called him. So, yeah. But
Yeah.
on my level, I do have to remind myself and also focus on my accomplishments.
Do you think that is sometimes a feature of being disabled, that you can have such a desire to prove yourself to yourself that you can overcome it? You can drive yourself too much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, different people have different coping mechanisms, but for some people, that's their coping mechanism. Is like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll prove to myself, and I'll prove to the world that I'm capable, and
Yeah.
so or I can help, or I can, do it. So that's definitely my coping mechanism, and I'm sure for many others, some just sit back and don't do much, and which is to me very sad, but it's their way of coping, or they stay home, they just don't look for extra challenges, they do things that are more in their comfort zone, and they just stay there and, do the best they can within their little box.
Yeah. In your everyday life, where are you like held back, and where are you able to function normally with your visual disabilities?
So this is also what I'm saying is I'm saying for myself. It's not necessarily for all visually impaired people, because different people have different strengths and different interests. And sometimes they'll go out of the comfort zone for certain things that I won't go out of my comfort zone for. For instance,
Got it.
as I told you before we started, I don't like to cook much. I cook a little bit, not much. My husband helps me a lot, and that's what we do with cooking. Although and especially in our traditional families, the woman is the one who cooks in the house. So in our house, it's not so traditional in this way, and not in many other ways. Um, but I have visually impaired friends who are great cooks. So it doesn't mean that if you can't see, you can't do it. But it is sometimes challenging, and you have to figure out ways to do it, and you have to have techniques, and you have to be able to smell. I don't know. And to me, it's so off-putting. It's something that's it's not worth so much of my time. Sometimes I do a little bit. um,
A cherry pie later today.
yeah, the cherry pie, if I'll get it done for my mother who loves it. Anyway, especially if someone tells me they love it and they appreciate it, then I'll go out of my way
Uh-huh.
to do it. Um, but I'm more. I love to help people and be involved with my organization and my students and coming and going. And I'll take buses. I even at some point learned how to take the subways when I was doing college to Manhattan. I didn't love it. I'm not a city girl, so I haven't done it since. I don't know if I would never do it again, but it's definitely been something that I've tried. And there are blind people who do take public transportation all the time, especially the subways. I take buses, I take Ubers. I'll come and I'll go, and I have my cook friends, who are great blind cooks, who say, "Oh, I don't know how you do that, why you would even put yourself on a limb like that and go to like Brooklyn and this and that and work. And
Yeah.
I do, so it's really a matter of what you're interested in and what you're, definitely there are certain challenges that are global for people who are visually impaired. Shopping is number one I haven't heard anyone saying they could do it themselves. Online, definitely some can do some of it, if it's an accessible website or accessible app.
Yeah.
I'm also not so good at that. Like I have a friend who's very good with shopping on Target. She claims Target's website is completely accessible. Walmart's is semi-accessible, and there are Instacart, and there's different ones that are fairly accessible that blind people use. But definitely shopping, I would say, is number one. Number two is, I know that's number two, but that's a challenge for a lot of people when we go places and we have to serve ourselves, like food. That's a challenge. People don't even realize it sometimes. I could go up very close and touch the food and smell the food. That's what I do in my house, but don't think you would appreciate that in a public environment. So it's like always appreciate when people say, oh, can I serve you? Can I help you? Do you want a drink? When they're in a public place, because sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's like, okay, who am I going to ask for help? And if I'm not using my cane, most people might not even know I'm visually impaired. I actually recently went to a wedding and I didn't bring my cane with me and I was kind of hungry. And I finally went up to someone. I'm like, okay, who do you go over to? A mother with a child? No, the mother's too busy with her child. Somebody who's hopefully looks kind of alert that they would know how to help you a little. Some people are a little spacey and they're not going to, even if you ask, they won't know how to help you and they'll become all flustered. So it's like I went up to this person. I said, I'm visually impaired. Can you help me get food? But then I was thinking to myself, I should have been using my cane now, and I should be using my cane all the time. Like my therapist once told me, it's your identity. You should have it with you all the time. I said, you're right. Maybe one day I'll get to that point. But when I walk the streets, especially, I don't even feel safe nowadays, especially when I'm crossing and everything, to walk without a cane. So most of the time, if I'm on my own, you'll see me using a cane on the streets. Indoors, weddings, whatever, still a work in progress.
At last I saw you, you didn't have a cane when I went to pick up the audio reader.
Because I was just coming out of a building that I already had gotten to. But when I walked to that building, I did use a cane just to come in and out. I didn't use it, but it was in my pocketbook.
Okay.
If I would have had to walk anywhere, when I take an Uber, I'm not gonna, take it in and out just to get from the house to the Uber. And I have one of my students' mothers tells me, where's your cane? Why don't you use the Uber driver to see you're visually impaired and whatever. I'm like, look, if I really need to, I'll tell him I'm visually impaired. Like, should I take my cane out just to tell him? It's still, I guess, the comfort level.
Why aren't you comfortable with a cane?
Sometimes it's just not practical because I don't really need it. I can see enough to get to the Uber and I can see enough to see, basically what the Uber is and, whatever. So I should take it out, unfold it, and then fold it back when I get into the Uber because I'm not going to keep it open in the Uber. So I'll have to fold it back up. Sometimes it's just a matter of practicality. But it's not like the cane is a very big issue, especially in our community. And speaking of which, yes, people are very uncomfortable with canes. They'd rather walk and people won't notice that they're visually impaired and maybe have the chance of bumping into things or tripping. If they feel that they have generally enough vision, they're not going to use it. I've pushed people to start using canes. I've gotten people to start using canes and they say it's all my credit. So it's not like I'm totally resistant to the cane. I'm almost there. I'm at 95%. I have others that are at 0 or at 10% and almost never use it. So yes, I'm not against using the cane, but there is a certain stigma, it's like when you're in a wheelchair, you have no choice. You want to get around, you're in a wheelchair, you have to use your wheelchair. When you have a cane and you have some vision, it's like, oh, do I really need it now? I can sort of see enough to get around, to get by, So there is that hesitation. I still have that hesitation, as I told you. If I wouldn't have had it, I would have had it everywhere with me. Even my totally blind students, like when she's in an indoor place and she goes to a wedding, she's like, no, I don't bring my cane. I just hold on to someone. I said, really, we should. We should be using it all the time. Sometimes it's just not 100% practical, especially if you don't have a foldable cane. Some people have these canes that don't fold up, and it's like kind of bulky. But people claim that the NFB says it's a good thing to have a cane that doesn't fold up because then you really have to have it with you and you can't just fold it up and put it in your pocketbook. So it's a whole discussion in itself, the cane, in the Jewish world, more so even than in the secular world, but everywhere. It takes a while for people to get comfortable and start using it.
Yeah. Can you talk more about the element of being different in the Jewish community? What it's like and maybe what your ideas are to deal with it?
Yeah, so there's in a way the being different is even better if you're in the community like ours because we are a very protective and a very
Yeah.
not only charity, but like helping based community. So people are always ready to help. And sometimes they don't know how to. And sometimes they're nervous if you have a disability to come over to you and offer it. But if you ask, there's always an outpouring of, support and help if you know how to ask for it and people know how to give it, that is, and have the right attitude, because sometimes they'll help you and make you feel like a real charity case, which doesn't always feel so pleasant.
Yeah.
So sometimes parents are overprotective and they're, not going to let their kids do anything, which is terrible for my students. So there is that. It could be a negative and it could be a positive, the overprotectiveness, and sometimes it's not only overprotective. Sometimes it's they're embarrassed, with their kids using a cane again or some other thing, and that really deprives the kid from their level of independence or whatever skills they could be learning because of it. So there's pros and cons to the overprotectiveness. In general, it's difficult to be different. It's difficult to have to ask people for help for things you can't do. It's much easier when people offer help, and when we have more volunteers, readily available. We have this dream of starting more of a volunteer program. We sort of started it. One of my colleagues from my support group started. She got one person to volunteer, and hopefully she's going to continue and do some more. But that person says it changed her life. It's not like she has to go into the store and ask random strangers for help, which I absolutely hate to do. That's why I rather not do it. I have visually impaired friends who would just go into the grocery store and try to find things on their own. And if not, they just ask people, and some people are helpful and some people are not. Like, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather just go with someone or have someone help me shop, the chafila to begin with, and not have to ask random strangers for help. At least not with shopping. Like when I'm in a street and I need help, getting places somehow there feels a little less uncomfortable for me personally.
Uh-huh.
But there's also the difficulty of being, within a box, within a community where, everyone wants to look normal and be the same and look the same. I'm not so much that way, but, that puts me out of the box. And in some ways, it's hard for me, and it's others don't appreciate it. I'm very out of the box in some ways. I'm still very much part of the community, but in some ways I do my own thing, and I do what I feel is right or what I want to do. And sometimes it looks strange or it looks different, and some people don't appreciate it. But I say, as long as I don't really physically hurt anyone, and I'm not really making anyone suffer, and that's what I keep telling my students and myself and others, then I'm allowed to do it, and I should do it, like using a cane or whatever else it is, or even using my technology. Yes, people in our community are very against using smart technology, but this is a game changer for people who are visually impaired. And I try to emphasize that even with the schools. Most schools, I should give them a lot of credit, are open to it. We filter it if we can prove, that they won't have free internet access or whatever. Most schools haven't had an issue with using iPads or anything like that. Sometimes it's the parents that don't even want to approach the schools because they're so afraid, which is terrible if you ask me. But people definitely, I'm sure, give me the looks and sometimes give me the comments about using smart technology. And I'm like, if it's made for anyone, it's made for us, and it makes a huge difference in our lives. So
Your family is very out of the box in general.
Right.
But on the subject of community and shame, my question is about shidducha matchmaking, which I think is something that a lot of people are especially thinking about when they think about fitting in.
We're still part of the system. The system is, you have a disability, there's no way that you're going to be matched up with someone who doesn't have an official outside obvious disability. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be an obvious, it could be an inner disability, but an existing discussed, openly discussed disability. It's generally going to be a disability with a disability. This is our community. Although, at least the very, Hasidic, the ultra Orthodox, and maybe the more modern Orthodox, there is a little bit more of openness about shidduchim, with people with disabilities. But it's interesting because I was saying that even in the, non-religious world, I've been to these conventions many times. The couples are either both of them are blind or they're married to someone with some kind of disability. I guess because automatically, you'll connect with someone with a disability, but not always. Not always. There have been, people who just fell in love and they met. So that doesn't really happen much in our community. So yeah.
Are you upset about that? Is that
sometimes, we discuss it, my friends and I sometimes, it's not fair. My friend is like, why do we have to marry someone with a disability if we have a disability? I said, well, good luck in changing the system. Or you could just go out of the community and try to live with, out there, and there maybe you can have a chance. But overall, it's hard. Sometimes it's challenging because we both have, disabilities. My husband's a paraplegic. He's in a wheelchair, and he's a great person, and he's, but there's definitely challenges that come with disabilities, at least on the outset, that seem more challenging than supposed quote unquote regular people. Although everyone really comes with their challenges, but still, it's an additional layer. But we make the best out of it, and sometimes it becomes more challenging than we think we want to deal with at some points. But it is what it is, and that's what it is, right?
Was there even ever a pressure that you experienced to hide any part of yourself?
Not in my family. Unfortunately, we have people in our group who have had where they hid their disability, and it's very traumatic. But then on the other hand, for me, it was also hard. My father was too open in a way. I felt very uncomfortable about it. So when I was a teenager, now I appreciate it so much. I think it's definitely the healthier route to go. Even though it made me a little uncomfortable, it's definitely better to be open about it than to hide it and to try to minimize it and to pretend that's definitely the harder way for people. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean your father was too open?
Well, he would go around and say, I'm visually impaired, and, talk about it and talk about himself. And he's just in general very talkative and very open about his life. And he has no secrets and no nothing. He's like a very, open, blunt kind of person that, can make you cringe sometimes. But in some ways, it's good. It's healthy. I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now.
I think so. Wow. I can't believe we're this far in the interview and I'm just coming to ask you about seeing eye dogs. Do you? Yeah.
A whole nother topic. Of course, dogs in general is not so accepted in our community. So that would make it, you would think it would make it even more stigmatizing than a cane. Although we have somebody in our community, we just had yesterday for the first time, we had a get together for visually impaired men. We never had that. We once did for boys, for Yiddish speaking Bacharim. We had 2 times a get together, but we never did like in general, just visually impaired men. It wasn't a big event. We had like 9 visually impaired men, but it was pretty big to get it together and that they actually showed up. And one of the people in the group has a huge issue. His vision is quite limited. He does not use a cane. Either he just, I guess, doesn't go out on his own or he goes with people holding on to people. A cane he is very resistant about using, but he's actually thinking about, maybe he asked me what I think about a dog. I was kind of surprised, but he says that till he was 8, he had a dog himself. He didn't grow up religious, I think, till he was 8. So there must be some kind of background that he wants a dog, because in general, people do have issues with dogs, and there aren't too many people in our community. There's one person who actually came to our event yesterday who lives in Borough Park, and he, walks with a dog. He's pretty religious, not Hasidish, but Litvish. And he says he couldn't manage with a cane. It was just impossible. And the dog is his lifesaver. And then there's a woman who lives also in Brooklyn who is at this point bedridden, doesn't really walk around much. But until then, she actually had a guide dog also. She said actually Rabbi Belsky helped her apply for it. And when she got it, he said, oh, this is a fine Hund. So she got her support for her dog. Those are the 2 from people within the New York metro area that I know of that have gotten dogs from. In my groups altogether, I would say, for the real more higher functioning visually impaired people, I must have at least, probably about 200 people. So from the 200 people, 2 have it. So what is that? 1%. I say if I'm going to lose more vision, which is very likely it will happen. By now, my father is totally blind and he has maybe some light perception. But I am definitely very seriously thinking of, if it will mean compromising my independence, I will get a dog. I've been talking about it a lot, and I'm curious about the dogs, and I listen to things about the dogs, and I'm not ruling it out. I wouldn't get a dog as a pet, but I would get him for practical purposes. So definitely not something that I'm saying no to. And I know, there was this recently, they did do this a short film, Babka. I don't know if it's going to be published.
Yes, it's published. I don't know when it's going to come out.
Yeah, I asked Farina where it's up to. I know we have our issues with it, but it's an interesting idea that she did this, this Williamsburg person getting a dog. And I was saying, if anybody, if it's going to be for real, it's going to be my brother who very actively uses a cane. And he himself also says that, he might maybe one day consider getting a dog, if it will help his independence. So yeah, that's the short and long answer.
Cool. You know, I was once doing a live video and your brother passed me and I guess he was with someone and came over to me and said hello, which was very sweet.
And he was using his cane.
I think so.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I
he's
remember.
very good about it. We have some family members in our own family who have issues with a cane, but him and I are
You're
the
the
ones who are
champions.
using. We're trying to be the champions. Yeah.
What's the issue with a dog?
Oh, that you have to figure out yourself because we've never gotten to the bottom line with it. That's the person. She asked me. She asked my father. We kind of figured out the issue with a dog is the issue with pets just altogether in our community, that it's more of a modern kind of concept, just like
Yes.
technology is an issue. I guess pets are an issue. She said because people have a lot of kids. There are many people in our community that don't have a lot of kids and still don't have dogs and cats. It's just a cultural thing. I don't know if it has a very clear explanation. You could say it's not kosher and it's not good to have, especially more dogs more than cats because they have, I don't know. But that's
You have
like,
to walk them on Shabbos. That's a problem.
yeah, I guess. I don't know. There are plenty modern Orthodox people who have dogs and they
Yeah,
take
that's
them from the
true.
household. In our community, it's just something that's just not part of the not part of the system. It's not part of the box. It's become more so than it used to be. I think more people have
Yeah, some people have cats, I think.
yeah, more even puppies. It's become a little more uh,
Yeah.
acceptable. Not much, but yeah.
Do you not have, why don't you have an interest in a dog as a pet?
I never liked animals. Honestly, I was very afraid of animals. My father had the caputis all those years, chickens, and I never touched the chickens. I was half of our family loves them, and half of the family hates them. I was very squeamish about animals all my life. I never really liked animals much. So I'm pretty good about it now. When I go to the places where there's guide dogs, I don't move away when the dog touches me. I actually stay in one place, and I even touch them. So I've become more desensitized over the years, but I never really loved animals. So
Your father bringing chickens, so your father would have like a little business during the high holidays where he'd bring the chickens so people can do the chicken ritual.
yeah.
And what, you played with the chickens?
I didn't. I hated them. Others did. Some of my siblings did. But I never really liked animals much. I was very squeamish about touching them, about being near them, about smelling them. The whole 9 yards. I never
The
really.
chickens definitely smell.
Yeah, chickens are
But
worse than dogs. But I never really liked when we went to farms, zoos, I never, some love to feed
uh,
the animals. And, it never was something I was interested in or enjoyed much.
most people though don't have dogs, mostly because like you, they're afraid of dogs. They're sensitized to dogs. Like that's the main.
I mean, my father said my grandfather had a dog. If he had a farm, he had a dog. A
Oh,
lot of Yiddish
really?
people in the Altaheim had dogs because they needed it as a watchdog. I don't think they really had them as pets. They had them again for services, but it's not like it's. My father is not afraid of dogs. My father's not afraid of animals. I actually recently brought it up to him when we were busy with his baka, and she spoke to him. I said, Tati, maybe we get you a guide dog. He's not afraid of animals. He's perfectly fine with animals. He said, no, I don't have a good balance. It wouldn't be good for me. I still think maybe it would be very good for him, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Do you want to talk about more about your work, your organization?
Yeah. So we started our organization many years ago. We had
What's it called?
what's called Insight Beyond Eyesight. So we started it very unofficially, very informally. We used to have support groups like telephone support groups. That's how it started, like teleconferences every so often, whenever we found a speaker, every few months. And then we became an official not-for-profit about 3.5 years ago. And we've done more in-person events. We've done a Shabbaton, a weekend together. I've done small events just for, let's say, especially since I became a teacher of the visually impaired, just like girls, or like a weekend or a trip or different things. I'm always on to the next thing. We did this thing for men yesterday. Sometimes it's very spontaneous. Sometimes it's planned for months and months. Sometimes I find they come out the same anyway. um, and I just help a lot of people also one-on-one. I get a lot of calls. I'm the go-to person for resources and services. Medical, I'm not involved with. I send them to these medical referral places for doctors and for treatment or whatever. I'm more involved with like, okay, you came to you came to terms with it. This is your vision, or at least for the time being, and you want to see what's out there for help, to function. That's where I come in for the functional part. our organization. Um, and we're always I'm striving for the sky. I have a lot of good ideas. Many of them don't work out. Some of them do work out. Sometimes I feel like I do too much, and I get too involved and too entangled, and it's not easy. I have my colleagues who help sometimes, and I get very passionate and sometimes do things too quickly. So, but we definitely try and we accomplish, and we're out there, and hopefully we help a lot of people.
Wow. In what way can you give examples of ways that maybe the Muncie community has changed because of activism for the blind? Like, I'm sure there is a need for accessibility everywhere, no?
Yeah, I do also sometimes get invited to speak, schools or public gatherings. I don't always have the time anymore, so I sometimes send some of my friends instead of me. Um, I think that helps a lot, the sensitivity, to hearing about, a personal story. Nowadays it's in general like it became a thing. You get inspirational speakers all the time, schools, and it's a nice thing. I definitely think it helps, and it's good that they're open about it. Sometimes I feel like they put us too much like on a pedestal, and they almost like idolize us. But then when it becomes anything real and having to trust us and give us a job, or someone has to actually go shopping with me or something, then they become very uncomfortable and they don't want to know me. So it's
No.
nice when when you hear a speech and someone inspirational and you get inspiration. It's like, what do you do about that inspiration? I call it impressed. They get impressed. Inspiration is
Yeah.
only when you do something about it. You do something good for yourself or others. So I'm definitely kind of popular in our community. I don't know if it's good or bad. Sometimes I wish like I can just like you know cover my face up and not everyone should know who I am, and it doesn't always feel so pleasant. But I hope I've made a difference. Can I say I made a big difference on a macro level in the community? I don't know. I wish I would. Whenever there are opportunities arise, I try. I do my part. On my small level to help people and to do things. Yeah.
Your family is also somewhat fairly musical. Are you also?
I'm kind of musical, not extremely musical. I could figure out a song on the piano, and I can hear when someone is kind of off tune or whatever.
I
My son is
see.
very musical. One of my visually impaired, my Shmuley is also fairly um, musical. Um, but yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. Not
Uh-huh.
musical, but not super musical.
Uh-huh. Wow. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up the interview? You want to talk about the blind doctor, which is a passion project for you?
Yeah. I have this dream of so this blind doctor book. It's a great book. It has so much to offer. It's not 100% clean, at least not for people in our community. It's not terrible, but it has cursing in it, and it has some romance. Not terrible, but I'm still debating if I want my kids to read it, and my students definitely not. So that's just one issue I had with it. But it's interesting. I read this book 6 years ago. I read a lot of books about blind people. This one
Oh.
somehow touched me. And I when at the end of the book it says where he's buried in a Jewish cemetery in Chicago. And I had this like in the back of my mind. One day when I go to Chicago, I want to go pray at his gravesite.
Oh.
And that was like 6 years ago or 7 years ago. I don't know. Whenever I read that book. And this summer, I went to my blind friend. We actually did a video how she shows me how to cook. I don't know. She has to. They have to edit it, and I don't know. She probably we're gonna either post it on our website or on YouTube. We don't know yet. Anyways, I went to visit her. I went to her for a few days, and she actually came to my house last year, and we did a little cooking program for a week for visually impaired teens and women. So so I told her I want to do one thing when I come to Chicago. I got to go to this gravesite. And she says, "Oh, works out well. Her husband's not alive anymore, and he's also buried in that cemetery and the other side. But whatever it is, we'll figure it out." So she helped me. Her daughter, showed me to the grave, to the where he was buried, and then they went to where her husband is. And I did. I went there and I prayed there, and we looked at the headstones, and it's very sad because all it says is Jacob Balatin, born this year, died, this date. Doesn't say he was a doctor. Doesn't say anything in Jewish, Yiddish wise. It says Jacob W. Balatin, actually, and that's one of my things that I have to figure out what the W stands for, because it doesn't say it in the book. What was his middle initial? If somebody, wants to learn in his memory, learn any, Mishnayos or
Oh,
Talmudical
I
things, and
see.
I don't even know his middle name. And it's interesting because right next to him is his parents, and his parents is completely Hebrew, no
Hebrew.
English on their headstones. That's the full names the way traditional Jewish burials would be done. And I'm so curious. I have a lot of questions about him. He was totally blind, and he was very, very accomplished. It was sad, the Jewish part. He didn't have a chance even to remain religious, even if he wanted to be. His parents supposedly were devoutly Orthodox. He was sent to, I'm not going to say the whole story, but he was originally, the public school, of course, didn't want to accept him because in those days, public school didn't take kids with disabilities. And the Jewish school happened to have been nice and accepted him, but they didn't know how to deal with him. And they ended up recommending the School for the Blind, which seemed to have done wonders for him in terms of independence and skills and everything. But obviously, the Jewish part, completely fell away. And then, he was joking how they made him eat pork and all that. He did seem to have a connection throughout his life with this Rabbi Bamberger, whoever that is, that I still need to do research with. But, he wasn't very religious, but he definitely was very, very accomplished. And he fought for the blind at the end of his life. He even made a blind Boy Scouts group, and he did so much. And there's so much. I'm not sure which part exactly, but just the whole story touched me very deeply. And I have this since I went to that gravesite, and I actually went to Chicago with a friend who wrote a children's book for, it's called Many Ways to See, just about a blind girl who, how she goes through a day in her life. And it's a cute book. It's for little kids. And I said, what? I'm also doing a children's book. I'm doing a children's book about Jacob Latin.
Uh-huh.
So it's my dream. I don't know if I'm doing it. I want it to get done somehow. I think there's a lot that the world can learn from him. I think he had so many struggles and challenges, and he just fought, and I could relate to him so much also, especially now that I work with totally blind kids. And even for myself, even through college, it was not easy, even the last part when I became a teacher of the visually impaired, even they weren't 100% accessible. It's like your whole life is a fight sometimes. That's what I feel like, at least when I'm out there. If you're sitting in your house and you're cooking, it's not so much of a struggle. But if you want to do things and you want to accomplish things, it's like you're always up against mountains.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot the world can learn from Jacob Latin.
So what should we put out there? Anyone who wants to co-author the children's book with you and research it? Because I thought you wanted a collaborator.
Yeah. If they want to, they know where I could get funding, or I have my sister claims that she would love to do it with me one day, but of course she would have to get funded, or she would have to give up some of her jobs, or maybe co-author, whatever it is. Yes, absolutely. I'm open to it.
Got it. Okay, someone with a huge pile of money should come along, and
even if they're not, even if they have experience, authoring books or whatever, even that's good enough.
Got it. Okay, let's put the word out there and hope something big happens. Preferably someone with a lot of money sponsors your work.
That's always great. A lot of money can do a lot of good things. I have a lot of things I can do with money.
I think so. I agree with you.
Organization and with others, and even the general community. The sky is the limit of what we can do if we had more money. But I do the best I can with whatever funds I have. Some organizations will first do their fundraisers, or first find an expensive place, and then they'll figure out them. I said, first I do what I need to do, then we'll figure out the money. I don't do things that are big, that are out of my reach, and that I can't see in the foreseeable future that I can cover. I only do very small events, and even when I do a little bit bigger events, I get very anxious about the finances. So I just try to do it cheap and do it simple, but do it practical, and help as many people as I can. And I many times I help even non-Jewish or non-religious people. I don't only help people in my organization. Of course, this is my focus, but still, I'm always happy to help anyone.
So can we put a link in the video to your charity, or where people can donate to your work?
Sure. InsideBeyondEyesight.org. Simple as that. That's our website, and my son is the one who maintains it. It's not the fanciest, most professional, but as I told you, we try to be economical. And my son has talent, and I think it's okay. It's as good as we need it for right now. People have all kinds of recommendations. We have to make it more this and more that and more accessible and more. I said, I do the best we can, with whatever we have. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Orienti, for this wonderful discussion. I'm going to put the link in the video description. And thank you to you and to the viewers on YouTube and the listeners on the podcast.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.